welcome back to my channel. And as promised, I am back today to talk about my top favorite books of 2021, the books that absolutely blew me away and that to this day I cannot stop thinking about. So before we jump into all that, I will first off apologize for the super loud heater. This room is terrible. This is my office, so I always feel really bad because every time the air conditioner or the heater pops on, it's super loud and it's like right behind me. So anyways, if you can hear it popping on and off, that is why. Also, I did have a few complaints about the audio quality being low on my last few videos because I bought a new cell phone, and the new cell phones apparently do not have headphone jacks. I had like an old-fashioned lapel mic that you plug into your phone, and it does not have a plug-in. So I'm looking for a Bluetooth microphone. I need to like go Amazoning it up later to see if I can find one. In the meantime, I have dollar store Bluetooth headphones that have a built-in microphone. So you guys will have to let me know. I did a test video. It seemed like it was better. If not, just holler at me. But I'm in the process of trying to find a Bluetooth microphone. So, anyway. Alright, we are talking about my top favorite reads of 2021. Now, I'm pretty lenient when it comes to giving out 5 stars. These are the ones that they're technically 5 stars because we're on a 5-star scale, but they're more like a million stars in my head because, or I don't know, Jen from the book review says she has 6-star books. I guess these would be my 6-star books. They are books that were absolute favorites for the year that to this day I cannot stop thinking about. And some of them you guys may remember because I've talked about them a few times, but some of them I read earlier in the year, so we'll see if you remember them or not. So we're going to start off strong. My first couple books for the year are by Cora Riley. No surprise here, I talked about Cora Riley a million times, and I read her Bound in Blood series last fall of 2020, and at the beginning of this year I read her Kimura Chronicles. Why did I draw a blank there? Anyway, I read her Kimura Chronicles, and while I love the entire Kimura Chronicles, like I'm obsessed with them, that's my favorite series from her, and I cannot tell you how many times I've reread that series since the beginning. I read these in April of 2021, and I think I've reread the entire series like at least 3-4 times, and my favorite book in the entire series is Twisted Pride, which is the story of Remo and Serafina. I am obsessed. If you have not heard of this book, you need to. I will say that you need to at least read the first couple books in the Kimura Chronicles because I think it leads up to the storyline better. But basically in this story you have, they're fighting against the outfit in Chicago, and Remo decides to kidnap Serafina, who's getting married. She's marrying an underboss, and so as a power move, he decides to kidnap her and defile her and all this and send her back to the family because he wants to basically kill the one dude's father. What's his name? Fabiano's father, as a favor to Fabiano, and just because it's a power move in the mafia. But what he's expecting of Serafina and who Serafina actually ends up being is totally different. He's expecting like this weak virginal chick who has no experience in life, and he ends up finding this amazing woman who like fights him tooth and nail and just has a really great backbone. I love this book, and it's my favorite of the entire series. I think I've read it, I don't even know how many times. This one and the second one, which is Twisted Emotions, is my absolute like 2 top favorites, but this one was like a 6-star. Like, can't get out of my mind. Still my favorite book I've ever read by Cora Riley. And I also read Sweet Temptation, which I put on here. It is a standalone book, but it's connected to the mafia families. So I'm drawing a blank here. Is she outfit? This is the story of Julia and Cassio. Julia, like most mafia girls, is married off at like the age of 18, and she ends up marrying Cassio, who she's fearful of, and a lot of people are too, because there's a rumor that he killed his first wife. So she's marrying a man who's older than her. It's an age gap, and he has 2 small children. So here she is, an 18-year-old girl, not too far out of high school, who is suddenly married to a man with 2 small children and watching their relationship work. Now, usually I don't like age gap romances because to me they're skeevy and creepy, and I'm like, dude, she's a kid, put it in your pants and leave her alone. But for some reason, this one just comes across so well. Even though the age gap is a thing in their relationship, she's so much mature for her age and matures very quickly and ends up being exactly what he needs. I love this book. It's one of the few age gaps that I actually really like. There are 2 this year that I read that I loved. This is one of them, and it's a standalone, so you can technically read it without reading any of the Mafia series, but it's always better if you read it with the Mafia series because it just gives you more depth to it. So next one I read is another Mafia romance. It's Ruthless Stranger by Maggie Cole. You guys who have followed me a while know that I've been working my way through her entire Mafia Wars series. I just downloaded the last release, which I think came out at the beginning of the month. I just downloaded it to read, so I'm going to be hopefully reading that this weekend. And this book started off the entire love of that series for me. It starts off, and I can't remember their names, which is really sad because I'm drawing a blank today, but it starts off with this woman who is basically sent on a, she's divorcing a really crappy husband who was using her as a cover, and he's a jerk, and so her friends take her out to is she in Vegas? I think she's in Vegas, and they take her out to get drunk, and they try to set her up with a one night stand, to forget your ex and to move on without him. Let's set you up with a really hot guy for a one night stand. And this guy is the one they set her up with, but he's actually secretly part of the mafia, and they agree that they're going to keep their identities a secret. But then a couple weeks or a month or so later, I can't remember the timeline, he ends up taking on a deal to get property or something to build a building, and she's one of the developers or something that's working there. I can't remember the specifics because I read this all the way back in April, so it's been a while since I've read it, but I absolutely loved it so much that I continued the series, and I actually have it on my list. So fun fact, at the end of every year, I like to go back and reread my favorites of the year, and some of these I've already reread 3 times, but this one is one I haven't, so I'll probably go back and reread it here in a couple of weeks. But I loved it, and if you have not checked out Maggie Cole's Mafia Wars series, you need to. All right, the next 2 are connected. I have Royal Games and Tangled Games by T.K. Lee. I have talked about these books a million times, and I love them for so many reasons. The first book introduces you to the couple, and the second book is a continuation of their romance. In this book, you have a woman who's driving Route 66 after, basically, it's a long story short, she has a past history with a fiance of hers who was killed prior to them getting married, and they always had this dream of traveling down Route 66 together, and she's getting out of another bad relationship that didn't turn out well for her. So her friends send her on kind of this little vacation to clear her head and start over, and they send her on a drive of Route 66. And while she's there, she keeps running into the sky, and for some reason they're stopping at all the same stops, as you do if you're driving Route 66, and they keep meeting. So they finally are like, well, since we're driving the same route anyway, let's just drive this together so we're not alone. And the guy that she meets is actually a prince of a country, and he's driving Route 66 because he has just been diagnosed with MS, and he is his disease is progressing to where he's losing the ability to drive and to do things for himself. So he wanted to have one last hurrah before he is basically unable to take care of himself and to do things independently. So that's how they meet each other. And so I really love the whole secret royalty, that there's disability representation and all the twists and turns. She's overcoming some past hurts. He's overcoming his disability and a lot of past hurts. There's a twist in the story, which I will not ruin for you, which connects the 2 of them. And I just absolutely loved it. So I'm really looking forward to continuing with that series. It's actually part of, there's several other books. It's part of a series. I've only read these 2, and in fact I think there's some that are preceding these 2, but you can read these 2 by themselves. I love them. I definitely recommend them, and they're 2 of the best books I've read the entire year. The next book I read is The Contract by Melanie Moreland. This one is such a common trope, but I absolutely loved it. And it was the story of this man who's a lawyer and his assistant, and he is passed up for a promotion in the law firm, and he's really kind of hurt about it. He's like, this is some BS. He's very arrogant. He thinks he's the best of the best. He's very, very stuck up, arrogant jerk, to be honest with you. And he treats his assistant like crap. But with him losing his, deciding to leave this job, she also loses her job. So he's like, well, look, I need to make myself look like a family man because I want to go to this law firm that's very family oriented. I want you to pretend like you're my fiance, and just pretend long enough for me to get in. We'll come up with some fake breakup and I'll have my job. So she knows that she's without a job because he just left the company, and so she agrees to yeah, whatever, I'll play along if you're going to pay me to do this, and he agrees to pay her a salary. And so they are fake dating. So it's a fake dating, fake fiance trope, and he is a total jerk. But between the new people at his job who are actually family-oriented people, and by spending time with her as a fake fiance, you see his personality change from this really unlikable, jerky character at the beginning of the book to like this really sweet, lovable family man who wants to marry her and wants a family. And it's amazing. There's a follow-up book to this that's the Baby Clause. And then there's another one after that that's like a short story that is their relationship after they go through some marital issues. No like cheating or anything, but like an injury that almost ends his life and some illnesses. So you see their story continue, but to this day, this first book, The Contract, it's one of the best fake dating tropes I have ever seen in my entire romance reading career. And I love fake dating trope romances, but this one just blew my socks off, and it's definitely one of the best books I've read of the year. And I know that Birthday Girl came out prior to 2021, but it's my first time reading it this year. I really avoided this book like the plague, and I have a whole video about this in depth if you want to get into depth, so I won't talk your ear off about this, but I will say that I avoided this book like the plague because I was like, age gap, he's old enough to be her father, she's dating his son, there's going to be cheating involved. And when I actually sat down and read the book, it is not at all what I thought it was. I am in love with this book. It is the other age gap romance I was telling you is really well done. Again, I don't like age gaps because to me they're creepy. Like, I'm sorry, if you're old enough to be her father, you need to go away. But this is done really, really, really well, and it's believable, and the way the characters are developed, like the relationship between the two of them makes sense. So I won't go into details, but please watch my video if you haven't already. I love this book, and I can see why it was all the rage back in the day, and I avoided it because I'm stupid. Because it's now one of my favorite books of all time. The next three are, and I say this for like, okay, the next three, one of these books is my favorite romance novel that has ever been written in my entire life. Top. Like, if you ask me, what is your favorite book that's ever been written? And if you could only bring one book to a deserted island, it's on this list. And it would be the Grip trilogy by Kennedy Ryan. The first book is Flow, the second book is Grip, and the third book is Still. And Still is the one that I would take on a deserted island. This book gutted me, and it is one of the most beautiful series that I've ever read. Again, I have a video up here. I'm going to link that you guys can go back and watch it all in detail. What I really love is that this trilogy is making its rounds around BookTube again. I've seen several BookTubers recently release videos about this trilogy, so I will link some of those below. This is the best trilogy I have ever read, and Kennedy Ryan has gone down as like a brilliant lady in my book. I am obsessed. This is my favorite series of all time, and Still is by far my favorite book. So if you're ever like, hey, let's send Mary a let's send Mary a questionnaire, and one of the questions is, what's your favorite book of all time? It's Still by Kennedy Ryan. Okay, the next book is going to shock you a little because I don't like Scottish romance. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I've never read Outlander. I don't want to. Men in kilts don't do it for me. I have no desire to go to Scotland. It's cold. It rains. There's guys in kilts with hairy legs. Like, I'm not... Sorry. It doesn't knock my socks off. Give me a businessman in a suit. Y'all can keep your kilts. However, I saw Jen talk about this book on her channel, Jen from the Back Book Refuge. And I was like, if Jen likes it, I'll probably like it. Because I like most of the books that she recommends. It's Never Seduced a Scot by Maya Banks. Hold on to your pants, guys. This book was amazing. So not only does it have disability representation, but like the fact that it was in the Scottish Highlands, I didn't even care. So in this book, I can't remember their names. I'm terrible at names, but you have this guy who's part of like one clan and who's a leader of one clan, and then a woman's from like another clan. I think he's a leader. Maybe he's not. I don't know. He's from one clan. She's from another clan. They're rival clans. And the king or whoever decides that y'all need to quit fighting like idiots and I'm going to marry your children to each other so y'all won't fight. Right? And so her family is like horrified because she had an accident as a child, and ever since she had this accident, everyone thinks she's touched in the head because she doesn't really talk to anybody, she doesn't interact, she doesn't know what's going on half the time, and so they think she's touched in the head, that she's not all there. But what they don't know is that she actually is deaf. This accident caused her to lose her hearing. So she's not stupid. She just doesn't know how to communicate. And you have to figure, they didn't have hearing tests back then. They didn't have, like, I don't know, people who knew sign language back then. So she has learned how to read lips, but doesn't know how to communicate that to the people in her family. So she marries this man, and what intrigues her immediately is that his voice has a tone in it that she can hear the vibrations of his voice. So she immediately like wants to be around him all the time because she can hear something, sort of. And then he figures out over time that she's not stupid at all. You know, because he goes into this marriage thinking like, great, I'm married to this woman who's not all there and I'm not going to have a real marriage. But finds out that that's not the case, that she actually just can't hear him. And once he figures that out, this takes off. And I mean, I loved this book, and I hate Scottish romances with a passion, but this book was amazing. It's a historical romance. If you don't like Scottish romance, you need to check this out. It made me cry. It was beautifully done. I'm obsessed with it. It's the best book ever. So glad that I listened to Jen's recommendation and decided to check this out, because now it is one of my favorite books that I read this year. All right, I'm down to my last three, and the next one is King's Crown by Marie Johnston. Marie Johnston is a new author for me. She's also an indie published author, and I read this one recently. I read this one in October, and this one really surprised me because, again, it's like a businessman falling in love with an employee type of thing, which is a pretty common trope. But what I loved about this one was that it's an age gap romance. That he's an older man. He's like, I don't remember his age. I think he's like late 40s, early 50s. He has children that are in their 20s. This person that he's dating is in her late 20s, so she's near the same age as his children, and it's a situation where she applies to this job, he is flying out, and she's flying out to interview. He's also flying out to go back to this workplace. He's not the actual boss that she'd be working for. She would actually be working for his son, but he's one of the owners of the business. And long story short, but they meet on the plane, they get stranded during a snowstorm, they have to share a room together because there's no more rooms at the inn, if you get my drift, and they don't end up sleeping together at that particular point in time. It's slow burn, so it builds up to them actually ending up together, but like the fact that it's an age gap, but it actually addresses things that you don't see age gap romances talk about. For example, the conversation comes up about, I've already raised my children, and I don't really want more. And how does she feel about that? You know, there are actual age gap issues. Like they bridge the gap of, okay, my children are the same age as you. How are we going to deal with that? And you don't see that stuff get addressed, especially in romance novels. Like we just kind of skim over it. They love each other. They'll be together forever. No one talks about all the other stuff they have to work through. And that's what I got about this book. I love how much they love each other, how dedicated they were to their relationship, and watching them actually work those things out. All right, last two. Boss Man by Vi Keeland. I always say, is it Vi or V? I don't know. I'm going with Vi. And this is another one that I absolutely loved. So it starts off really cute. She's at a restaurant with a date, and she's so bored. She's bored out of her mind. This guy's a total dud. And she's like calling her friend on the phone as she makes an escape to the bathroom. And she calls her friend on the phone and she's like, I need you to call me with an emergency so I can skip out of here. And he overhears her doing this, and he's like, you're a jerk. Like, this poor guy spent all this money to take you to a fancy restaurant, and you're going to ditch him because you don't think he's cute. You should at least, finish the date because he paid money for you to be here. So she kind of gives him a dirty look. He's given her dirty looks across the restaurant because he's also there on a date. And he decides to introduce himself. So he walks over to the table, and he's like, hey, I haven't seen you since middle school. He comes up with this fake story about we went to school together and we were each other's first kiss. And so he ends up sitting with her date, and him and his date sit with her and her date. It's this really funny banter for them while they're at this restaurant. Well, then fast forward a few weeks later, she goes on a job interview, and of course, who ends up being the boss? the guy from the restaurant. So it's another boss-employee restaurant or boss and employee relationship, but this one was really, really well done. It's another slow burn. It's like 3/4 of the way through the book before these two end up together. I loved it. He's having to overcome the death of a fiance that was by murder. So he's having to overcome the murder of his fiance. She's overcoming some really bad childhood trauma from crappy parents, and seeing them kind of overcome everything and end up together was really cool. It's one of my favorites. I've reread this one a couple times, and I read it in October. So that's saying a lot. Okay guys, and my very last book is The Darkest Temptation by Danielle Laurie. I just read this one in November, so this is a recent read for me. This is another mafia romance. It has been recommended several times to me. It's part of a series. This is the 3rd book in the series trilogy. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's going to end up being a trilogy or a series, but it's the last book and it is amazing. It is the story of this younger girl. She's just graduated from high school and she's engaged because you know how mafia do, and she doesn't realize she's part of the mafia. She just thinks her father has money and that she's rich, and she lives in Miami and lives in a mansion. She doesn't realize he's part of the mafia, but her parents are originally from Russia, so she decides that before I get married to this guy I really don't want to marry, I'm going to go off to Russia to see where my parents come from. While she's there, she has a little bit of an accident and runs into this man who kind of rescues the day, and he ends up inserting himself into her vacation, right? Like she meets him out all the time. They keep bumping into each other, and then he invites her out on a date, and she really likes him and has feelings for him. It's like really wants to pursue this relationship, and then goes to find out that he's actually in the mafia and that her father is too, and he's her father's enemy. So then he kidnaps her, and it's a whole like kidnapping, forced proximity type thing. I loved it though. It ends up so well watching the two of them like, I should hate you, but I love you. And then her father's not who she thought he was. He's actually, I don't want to say he's the bad guy in the situation, because he's not, because I mean they're both mafia dudes, like they're not angels, but her father has lied to her, and watching her uncover all of that, it was just really well done. One of the better mafia books I've read this year. So I gave this one like 5 million stars, and it's one of my favorites I've read. So those are my top favorite books of 2021. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, I'm going to probably reread some of these, so I don't know that my December wrap-up is going to be all that like plentiful. It'll have some new books, but it's going to be a lot of rereads because I always do that at the end of the year. So we'll see. What are some of your favorite books of 2021? If you did a video, leave me a link below so I can check them out. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye guys. Happy Vlogmas.